So why is it important and why is it interesting? I think as a scientist I have to say it's interesting because plants have a really good immune system. And that really fascinates me, that dialogue between a pathogen and the plant. Why is it important? Well, plant diseases, they eat about 15% of all food, but they don't do that, of course, on a very regulated way, because plants and diseases don't obey the rules. They do this very locally sometimes. So what you see is that leads locally to huge problems. Famous example of this is the Irish potato famine in Ireland. But the specific problem I work in, Asian soybean rust, is a much more recent example of where basically a disease blew over from Africa. This is in this case a fungal disease. Spores blew over from Africa via the trade winds, entered Brazil, where they were growing soybean at a large scale and still do grow soybean at such large scale. And basically it got traction in Brazil, and right now it's a $2 billion problem. Other examples include wheat blast in Bangladesh, where breeders had to really destroy their fields, where they were breeding actually new varieties that would yield more. Rice blast is a big problem, Panama disease is a big problem. So plant diseases all over the world, and I think this is only going to increase with global warming and travel, with basically globalization. What you will see is more and more plant diseases, and that's why you hear more and more about them in the press, will come into new locations where they weren't previously and start causing problems. So it's a much bigger problem than people realize, and it really impacts people on a daily basis, and especially farmers, of course. A lot of research has been done in understanding plant pathogens because it's such an important problem. However, what the 2Blades Foundation is doing is it's taking that knowledge and really bridging that gap from having that knowledge and actually doing something with it that is tractable and noticeable to farmers all over the world. We move significant insights that have been gained into practical application, and we do this with companies. So I have a long collaboration now with DuPont Pioneer to solve this problem of Asian soybean rust in Brazil, and that is also the bread and butter, I would almost say, of my group in the Sainsbury Lab in Norwich. But of course also using this knowledge to help people that need it the most. Yeah. We do this in Africa for wheat stem rust and soybean. Soybean and wheat are both very important crops in Africa, and that's why we focus on them. And these fungal pathogens are really critical threats. It's my privilege to work with a couple of very talented and gifted colleagues. One of them is Jonathan Jones in the Sainsbury Lab, but the other one is Sergio Bromischenkel at the University of Viçosa in Brazil. And one of the things we managed to do, so I mentioned before plants have an immune system. And what that basically means is plants need to see the pathogen. If the plants can detect the pathogen, they can basically know it's there, then the plant's defense system is activated, and as a consequence the pathogen is basically chanceless. And it's always a game of cat and mouse between the pathogen not wanting to be seen and the plant trying to detect the pathogen. And what we realized in the case of Asian soybean rust is that although most soybeans are not able to recognize this important pathogen, Asian soybean rust, there was a related plant, pigeon pea, that was able to recognize soybean rust. And what we did is you have to imagine you have a kind of a receptor, which is kind of like an antenna that's in a cell. And when these fungi invade, they try to subvert the plant's cellular machinery and immune system. And they do this with proteins called effectors. So these effectors go into the cell. And basically, we introduced a new receptor, an antenna, that is able to recognize these type of proteins. And then it triggers a very strong immune response. So you have to imagine that these plants are basically immune to the pathogen. Now, the other thing that we feel strongly about is something that is called durability. So having only one of these receptors it's not going to be enough, because the pathogen, there's huge numbers, billions and billions of spores in a field in Brazil. So what you want to have is several of these detection mechanisms, and preferably at several levels of the plant's defense mechanism, to really build a durable solution. So to have a durable solution to a pathogen problem. But what we were particularly excited about is that we can apparently move these receptors from a closely related species into soybean, and it basically works. It does the same job as it's doing in pigeon pea. And that is very exciting, because that opens up a whole realm of possibilities of new ways to really treat and tackle disease problems. I think right now we live in a very exciting time, because we have an incredible revolution at the moment in what is called genome sequencing technologies. So sequencing technology, you have to imagine, when I was a student, and that's not that long ago, you could get a sequence of a single gene that was, well, maybe what we would call 500 base pairs, and this would be done on gels, and you would really go A, C, T. You would have to by hand basically determine the sequence. You have to imagine now, a few years later, we're at this point where you can take a sample of the genetic material of a plant or a pathogen, and within a month you will have the sequence information of this entire plant or this entire pathogen. So technology has taken a giant leap, and also in the arena of identifying new resistance genes that I talked about. So plants have this eloquent immune system, this very elegant immune system, and but you need to know what is basically doing the recognition, and we've gotten better at that in the Sainsbury lab. We have developed a couple of very powerful technologies to do that faster than we were ever able to do this before. And I think these two developments will really lead to a situation where we will be able to tackle new disease problems, emerging disease problems, at a extremely rapid rate, where we will be able to bring solutions to farmers anywhere in the world that are more durable, environmental friendly, and incredibly effective. And so it's an exciting time to be a plant pathologist. Our biggest hopes are that we will understand so well how pathogens cause disease and how plants defend themselves, that we will be able to get crops that do not get disease anymore against some of the most important pathogens. So you have to imagine potatoes that don't have to be sprayed 12 times, per season of crop growth to keep away the late blight. Asian soybean rust is defeated, so you will have soybean plants in Brazil, and farmers don't need to spray against Asian soybean rust. They don't have to fear that if there's rains, and they can't spray because the weather is preventing it, they're gonna lose 10% of the harvest. You will have basically wheat plants growing in Bangladesh that will not get wheat blast anymore, because we cracked that problem in no time in the Sainsbury lab, and we know what to do against it. So of course, this sounds very futuristic, but I really think that in a time frame of 25 years, that is going to be an absolute reality, and there will always be disease challenges. But I think on the global scale of events, what we will be able to do against them is going to be so improved that people, wherever they live, whether it's in Western Europe, and you're a farmer and you have a family to feed and to send kids off to study, or you're in Africa and you might still be dependent on your own crops for your daily subsistence, that although there are still challenges to this, disease will be much less of a problem.